Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the Aspen City Council work session for November 28, 2022. On tonight's agenda, one main item, which is the new Castle Creek Bridge update, and secondarily, we have council board reports and council updates. And we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Trish is here joining us to introduce this first item, I believe.
Good afternoon,
Diane might be. Yeah, okay.
Mayor and Council. Diane Foster, Assistant City Manager, and with me is Trish Argon, City Engineer. And thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. You've asked us to talk with the community about the entrance to Aspen, and we're calling this discussion New Castle Creek Bridge, specifically because the majority of the entrance to Aspen has already been done, and so the New Castle Creek Bridge would be the last piece of the project. And as you know, nothing's been decided. So with that, I'm actually going to ask Trish to introduce Roland, who's online.
We have Roland Wagner from Region 3 CDOT, from CDOT. He's the regional or the central program engineer for Region 3. So Roland, are you online?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
There he
you.
is.
Okay, sorry, had to rejoin as a panelist, I guess. So, yep, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Roland.
Great, and Roland's going to take a couple of the slides as we go through this today. And unfortunately, Roland will not be with us for the about 60 other meetings we're going to have in the next 6 or 8 weeks or so. So we appreciate him being here today. Our Castle Creek Bridge project team, quick introduction. Sarah's part of the team. Pete Race, Deputy City Engineer. Jamie McManus, our Communications Manager. Mike Horvath, who's also an Engineering Senior Project Manager. Jack Dannenberg, who's Project Manager 3. Lynn Rumba, Mobility Division Manager. And Jen Uten. Yay! Jen Newton's with us today, and she's a Senior Special Projects Manager, and she is officially going to be a sponge for the next week, and we've got a full week ahead of us of public engagement, so there's be a lot to absorb. We also have Jeanette Downauer and Rachel Brenneman from Downauer and Manifest. They're our communications consultants. So over the next month, we're going to be talking with the community about what this is all about. We're at the very early stages of the community conversation, and we'll be letting people know also that there'll be other opportunities. What we'll do today is start with a 2-minute video, and we're going to take you through what we call the long version of the presentation, and it's very similar to a version that we're going to be doing Thursday night at 6 o'clock for a virtual open house. And two things we do tell the community when we do public presentations is that there are 2 options for moving forward, and also that it may seem like I want a bridge or that I might have a bias when I come to this discussion. The purpose of this is really to provide people with information so that if the City Council decides to put this on the ballot, and there is a ballot question at one point, and we do believe a ballot question will be needed, specifically to be able to go across the Merle and Thomas properties. While the right-of-way has already been approved, the open space has already been swapped, it is specifically for light rail, and so to run buses, we do believe there's a need for a vote. So.
Did that change recently?
You were not feeling well, so I decided it was not the right time to have that conversation with you.
Okay, so we're back to thinking we do need a vote.
We very much do think we need a vote. And one of the things, this is actually good for the community because we're laying out what we believe are all the facts today. And at the end of the day, they get to decide and hopefully be fully informed. Trish's computer decided to stop working now.
Our current Castle Creek Bridge is aging. It was built 62 years ago and needs to be replaced soon for everyone's safety. The preferred alternative approved by CDOT in the 1990s extends Main Street to the west over a new Castle Creek Bridge to connect to Highway 82, as it exists now at the roundabout. The roadway will consist of 2 general purpose lanes, one in each direction. as well as an exclusive lane for mass transit. This will create a continuous route from the airport all the way into town to better accommodate mass transit systems that provide a car-free option for commuters. New connected open space will be created between the roundabout and Cemetery Lane where the highway used to be, and a new land bridge will connect the roundabout to Main Street and minimize the impact on the surrounding landscapes and ecosystems, creating a new wildlife corridor to keep animals safe. We need to prioritize evacuation routes in Aspen. The current S-curve does not meet this need. The preferred alternative, however, will increase the capacity and improve safety.
For more information about the history of this project and its future, visit castlecreekbridge.com.
What you just saw is a 2-minute version of the video, and so depending on the place and presentation, we do short video, long video, or short and long presentations. And I do have to apologize, allergies are kicking my butt today, so that's why I sound really sick, and I'm not, and I've taken a lot of COVID tests. So to understand the history of the Castle Creek Bridge, it's helpful to start with Edward Holden. The year was 1890, and Mr. Holden announced that his company would construct a silver ore processing plant at the edge of the city. The following was taken from a book by Liza Wegman French, The History of Holden Merltzite, which was commissioned by the Historical Society. Trish found this quote, and I love it. There was widespread excitement in Aspen the fall of 1890. The Aspen Times declared, quote, "The sweet daydreams of those who have longed to see Aspen a great city are about to be realized," end quote. And the book goes on to say, Edward Royal Holden has announced his company would construct a processing plant for low-grade silver ore at the edge of the city. He also planned to build a town nearby and an electric street railway to provide rapid transit between the suburb and the city. So one of the reasons Holden chose to Aspen for his plant was the town's eagerness for it. The county commissioners decided to build the Castle Creek Bridge and that they wouldn't charge Holden for the planned streetcar line using the bridge. The streetcar line would connect Holden's proposed town, that was never built, to the city of Aspen, and the county commissioners agreed to build it, and then they ran out of money, and it was about $17,000, so CDOT came in and helped them build it. And they built the original Castle Creek Bridge in 1891, the same year that the silver ore processing plant opened. So here's a view looking down valley, Cemetery Lane's heading out to Red Butte to the right. Wow. And because of where, isn't that wild? And one of the, you may know this about mining towns, but a lot of the western ski resort towns looked like this in this period because of the need for wood to be used in the mines and for the plants. So hence the what probably used to have a lot of trees.
What they call tie hack, because they hacked all the railroad ties out.
Oh.
What don't you know?
That's a good comment that should be on the record.
We just said that tie hack was named for hacking all the railroad ties off the trees there.
In buttermilk, because when they brought the milk up for the laborers at lunchtime and it churned so much that it turned into buttermilk.
There we go.
And I thought, here I was.
No math?
I just stole the name of somebody else.
Here I was thinking that was the sound of my cough as I'm going up tie hack. Because of where Holden Silver Processing Plant was located, it actually wasn't possible to create a straight shot between the road you see on the left, and which is now Highway 82, and Main Street. So that's why the bridge is located off of Hallam instead of Main Street. And then the S-curves were also constructed in 1891 and are in the same location now as they were originally built. The original railroad bridge had to be dismantled before the new Castle Creek Bridge could be built. So 70 years later, in 1961, the bridge was dismantled and CDOT built the current Castle Creek Bridge in the same location as the original bridge's location.
Diane, how long did it take to construct that bridge in 1961?
I think you may have stumped us. It's a good Jeopardy
She's
question.
good, but she may not have looked at that question.
Maybe Roland knows. He's online. He's going to do this next slide.
That's a good question. I imagine it took 12 to 18 months to construct, would be my guess.
Thank you.
That's pretty fast. And Roland, this slide's yours.
Okay, yeah, so what we have here is just, like a 5-span bridge, built in 1961. As mentioned, when these bridges were designed at this point in time, they had about a 75-year design life. So, if you look at it in terms of an asset or a depreciation or however you want to evaluate it, it's an older asset. And I could walk you through all the piers and everything if you want to get real wonky, but I think you're all familiar with the alignment and how Power Plant Road comes down underneath the bridge and whatnot. So.
Roland, this one's yours too.
Okay. So what CDOT does is we have thousands of bridges in the state that are inspected biannually. So every other year they get inspected by a specialized inspection crew of engineers and inspectors. And they come out and they evaluate about 19, got right here. There's 19 or 20 different items on a bridge inspection report that are evaluated. And it goes into a form, and then there's a calculation there, and the end result is a sufficiency rating. Just a brief history of the inspection reports and sufficiency ratings for the past 10 years or so. In 2012, the bridge had a sufficiency rating of 62.6. And I should just preface this that, once a bridge falls below about a 50, that's where it gets on CDOT's radar as needing replacement at some point in the future. So in 2012, the bridge had a 62.6 sufficiency rating. At that time, there was a lot of cracks that were noted in some of the diaphragms and web stiffeners, and those were later repaired. Then in 2014, the bridge, actually in 2014 and 2016, it maintained that same sufficiency rating of around 63. In 2018, it actually dropped down to a 23. And the structural engineers tell me that the reason for that was due to an increase to the loading evaluation. So the loading evaluation is one of the 19 or 20 criteria that are used to evaluate the bridge. So at that time, a pedestrian barrier was added to the bridge, so the sidewalk was no longer part of the bridge for the truck loading evaluation. So the outside girders are smaller and were no longer evaluated to take traffic because the truck would no longer be physically able to drive on the sidewalk. So basically, they only calculated the larger interior girders, which allowed the rating to increase in 2020 to 52.4. We started to do an inspection in September of this year. Some of you maybe have been caught in traffic that day. We did get the deck and the top of the bridge inspected, but we weren't able to inspect basically below the bridge deck. There was a lot of traffic, and they need enough room to get what we call a snooper truck down under the structure to look at the steel girders and the bearings and the abutments and piers and things like that. So I talked to our staff bridge lead this morning, who oversees all the inspections statewide. And he said, well, what'll probably happen is we'll just issue a final report based on the inspection that they were able to do. And, the sub below deck probably will stay the same. And his opinion was that the sufficiency rating would stay about the same as it was in 2020, which is about a 52. So a few noteworthy things on all these inspection reports is, you know, the bridge is functionally obsolete. And what that means is that the lanes aren't wide enough. There's not standard shoulders. And, you know, it's basically obsolete in terms of the traffic loading and volume that it's experiencing today in 2022. There's been, you know, various scaling and cracking issues throughout the years that are noted in the inspection reports. When they get serious enough, or, you know, staff bridge recommends a repair, then we either put together an engineering project to go out and do the repairs, or we have maintenance forces that are specialized in doing these repairs, and they'll go out and do them and then document the repairs, and then that feeds back into the inspection reports and the next sufficiency rating calculation. So that's about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Yep.
My name is Rachel Richards, and thank you so much for your presentation and the detailed work that's within our packet as well. I guess I'm just wondering if the last inspection was September of 2020, and they did not get a chance to look at the underdeck and the structural elements, and now it won't be really looked at until 2024 for those lower elements? Is that, you know, that seems like a 4-year gap between inspections of kind of the crucial infrastructure below the pavement.
Agreed. And, you know, it's an ongoing conversation we're having with Staff Bridge. I can request that they come back out and do that inspection for below the bridge deck. The earliest, though, it would probably happen would be, I'm guessing, spring of next year, just as we're moving into winter. It gets more difficult and less safe to do those inspections, but I agree with your point. I would like to know what's going on below the bridge deck as well myself. So I can put in
and
that
I could
request.
fully understand waiting till springtime or beginning of summer when the weather's more appropriate, but I just wouldn't want to see a gap that waits until 2024. Thank you.
Look,
Is Mr. Wagner, is he involved in more of the presentation?
He'll be available at the end also to answer questions.
All right, then I just want to take this opportunity real quickly. Mr. Wagner, I just want to share our appreciation for you and CDOT. Even in the recent months with a lot of the construction that we've had on and some of the, you know, hardship that commuters and drivers and general public has endured, you guys have been just really great to work with. And I just wanted to share my appreciation. I think a lot of times some folks in difficult lines of work like yourself don't often hear that. But I wanted to let you know that I think, you know, our respect for CDOT and the work that you've done with us here, especially of late, is beyond reproach. And we thank you so much. And please pass that on to anybody on your team as well.
I will do that. And thank you very much. You know, we've had a great collaborative partnership with the city for really decades. Not only the engineering department, but other departments as well. And we do appreciate the funding contribution to help replace that Maroon Creek roundabout, as that was burdensome for not only CDOT, but for commuters and RAPTA coming through on a daily basis. So likewise, we extend our appreciation to the city as well.
Thank you.
One other thing we do tell the public is Trish had this analogy about a paperclip that I think is really helpful. The it works like a bridge, right? Bridges are designed to bend and they move and they're metal, and like a paperclip, after you bend it and move it around for so long, it becomes not usable? Or what did functionally obsolete? So why now? What's changed? Two of the biggest differences from this conversation than the one the communities had in the past is one is simply the age of the Castle Creek Bridge, and number two is that climate change has significantly increased the risk of wildfire. And before we move on, I do want to just give a brief, I know you as council know this, but a lot of times the community doesn't know what a record of decision or what a preferred alternative. So a record of decision, in our case, it was issued by the Federal Highway Administration. I worked in a city where we had a record of decision issued by the EPA. Any federal agency can issue them. And it actually represents the final approval of the environmental impact statement, which is required by NEPA, which, as you know, is a National Environmental Policy Act. And the Federal Highway Administration, a record of decision it's basically the go-ahead for the state to be able to move forward on the project. And then the preferred alternative, it took me about 3 weeks into this project to realize the preferred alternative is actually in the ROD and is most of the text of the record of decision is describing the preferred alternative and why the preferred alternative. And the preferred alternative is simply the one that best meets the project purpose and need. And in our case, we also have those 10 objectives, and those were used in the evaluation of the different alternatives that define the preferred alternative that's included in the record of decision. Thanks. So that brings us to today. This is from this fall. You probably saw it as you were driving by. The bridge is requiring more frequent repairs, and we can reasonably expect that in the future, the repairs like the one you see here done in the fall to the expansion joint, they will become more frequent. CDOT has repaired about 150 cracks in the girders of the bridge, and Trish tells me that the way that they repair a crack is similar to how they do it on your windshield. They drill a hole just past the end of the crack, and then they fill the hole, they weld it, and that will stop the crack from moving any further. And the best estimates right now is the bridge has 10 to 12 more years of useful life.
Can I ask one question, Dad? You're talking about the 10 objectives here. So are these 10 objectives that we have currently as we're taking this out, community-based planning, transportation capacity, are these identical to the initial goals that the preferred alternative and record of decision were studied off of back in the 80s and the 90s?
Yes.
They're the same?
Yep,
Okay.
they're the same. And it's important to note that having objectives be used in a preferred alternative is pretty unusual. So in a record of decision process, through the environmental impact statement, et cetera, there's always opportunity for public input, but there's not always like these community objectives that get put out and then stuff's evaluated against it. And so if there was, let's say the community, we got through these discussions, community said, no, we really want to do something different. We want a different alternative, then that would require a new record of decision, and it may not include those 10 objectives. Let's see.
I just want to clarify that a little bit further. There may be no community objectives. It's not just about those 10. There may be no community objectives in a new record of decision. That is at the discretion of the Federal Highway Administration in terms of evaluation criteria. We can make the ask. We don't have the power to grant it back to our residents.
I would imagine they would focus on transportation capacity and safety, and the things that they still need to look at. But there was a lot of work going into trying to get them to listen to community concerns.
So just a quick question. I think this would be important for the public to know. So if we did nothing, the state government could come in and do the project without taking our values into consideration. I mean, I don't.
They could come in and technically they could come in and do the preferred alternative, and right, CDOT has this obligation to keep us safe, and so they technically could come in and do that. I think that's right.
They're going to ensure the safety of the traveling public. What that looks like, we're kind of in uncharted grounds if we do nothing.
At minimum, they would fix the current bridge, but they may determine at some point that's not safe for the community.
Understood. Thanks.
Diane, you know, we've heard this end of its useful life. What does that mean? Does that mean the bridge can't be used at all, can't be used at current volumes? What exactly does that mean?
I'm going to turn that to Trish because she's going to understand that better than me.
So it was designed for 75 years, and that's what we call its useful life. There is, there's not an expiration date on it. It's not like, okay, you reach this date and it's, going to suddenly expire. However, in this case, because the bridge was never designed for this kind of loading, busiest two-lane highway in the state, we can expect that 75 years is pretty much the life that this bridge is going to have, is 75 years. So that's when we say useful life, that's what we're referring to.
So I guess what I'm asking is, can we use that 10 to 12 years of useful life as a timeline that we have to create to build a new bridge?
Yes.
Certainly by the end of 10 years.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will still, though, have to go through bridge repairs, et cetera, on the Castle Creek Bridge. And the ultimate, the preferred alternative does plan to keep the current Castle Creek Bridge and eventually repair that and turn it over to the city if the city accepted it.
Just a quick comment. There's a parallel with water rights and water crisis, water shortage, which I've always heard, and it's very scary, but, they say, at a certain point in time, human safety, public safety is going to be more important than water rights and water right law. And the state's not going to allow there to be dry fire hydrants on the Front Range so that someone can water their field for alfalfa export. There's a point at which comparative values get changed, and the value is human safety, and it's going to be that regardless of your water rights. And I think that, you can take a look at the highway the same way. At a certain point, CDOT is concerned about public safety and the access. And if our community doesn't do something and lets the current rod, I would say, expire or go null, they're going to look at a more simplistic type of entrance. Let me say it that way. Thank you.
Thanks. So just looking at some of the votes, the community has been talking about the entrance to Aspen for nearly 50 years. First of the 27 was in 1975. They ranged from votes on light rail, which is the 1996 date that you see there, the conveyance of the right-of-way across the Thomas and Merle properties, which was also part of the 1996 vote. There were votes in that process that did support funding a bus system. But in the mid-90s, traffic had soared to the point where Aspen's air quality, I think all of you were here, where Aspen's air quality was pretty bad. It was designated as a non-attainment area, as you know, for PM10, which is larger particulate matter. And this is a similar designation that are in places like Denver and Los Angeles. So it's actually significant. And one of the good things is that this council and the community and the past councils have taken action to get us into attainment, and so we're now on a maintenance plan. But the traffic volumes were part of the reason in the 90s that the air was so bad. So the community began to organize and started to plan for a new entrance to Aspen. And in 1995, when the community was talking about this, we didn't have the 4-lane highway at Shell Bluffs, and we didn't have 4 lanes coming into town, and the new Maroon Creek Bridge didn't exist. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. So we do in public presentations really want to take people through, make sure they understand that there were alternatives evaluated. However, we're not really planning on dwelling on that so much. So as you know, in coordination with CDOT and the community, there were 43 alternatives that were created. And if you look at these different ones under alignment lanes, et cetera, you can see how you do all the different versions of those and you come up with 43 alternatives. And they were screened by CDOT in the 4 stages that you see on the slide. And then the remaining alternatives were brought through for the full evaluation. And I was reading through the final EIS today, and you can see all the different ones and their evaluations in them. As well as in your appendix, there's a piece done by Ralph Trapani that goes through them as well. So in the final alternative, known as the preferred alternative, was the one that best met the project purpose and need, as well as the 10 objectives. And as I mentioned, the preferred alternative went through that environmental impact statement, and then after completed, the 1998 Record of Decision was created. It's a 37-page document. It's actually quite readable, and it outlines all the steps that were taken to arrive at the preferred alternative. And then I mentioned already that it's the go-ahead for the state to be able to move ahead with it. So, in the end, Federal Highway Administration and CDOT selected the preferred alternative because it represented those values. Those 10 objectives, they were established around 95, and they were established in the early 90s, and then in 95, the Aspen City Council, Picken County Commissioners, Snowmass, Town Council, CDOT, and FHWA, along with input from citizens and a technical advisory committee, created those. And I'm just skipping some stuff that we already talked about. The project intent, I'm just going to read it because I think it's interesting for people to know about what was it, and does it still fit today. It's to provide a balanced, integrated transportation system for residents, visitors, and commuters that reduces congestion and pollution by reducing and/or managing the number of vehicles on the road system. The preferred alternative was also viewed to reflect the character and scale of this community as well. As you know, it's a transit-oriented solution that keeps us to those 1994 traffic levels and allows for future transit options as well, like trackless tram, driverless buses. And it does encourage people choosing to ride transit by improving transit times. The solution does improve the flow and safety of traffic. However, it doesn't eliminate congestion. It also reduces accidents on the S-curve, which are higher than average on a similar stretch of highway. I mentioned project intent. Project need was the capacity of the existing transportation system is insufficient during peak periods. Safety, clean air, the visitor experience, and residents' quality of life are all compromised. And then the rest of the intent goes on to say, it shall be the best transportation alternative for the short and long-term goals of the community, community compatibility, safety, environmental preservation, clean air, quality of life, transportation capacity. The alternative chosen should be consistent with the Aspen, Snowmass, Picken County goal of limiting vehicles at or below 1994 levels. And the preferred alternative, it's not just what we're mainly talking about today, which is the Castle Creek Bridge and the right-of-way over Merleton Thomas. It's a combination of highway and intersection improvements and a transit system, and then also, as we'll talk about a little bit later, the transportation demand management program. And there are descriptors for all of these 10 objectives, but we can keep going. Another purpose that might be a little bit more important now than in the past is that providing better emergency and evacuation routes. The S-curves and Power Plant Road aren't sufficient for mass evacuation, and where ambulances are staged at the hospital, if there's an emergency in town, the ambulance will need to get in as quickly as possible. So with the preferred alternative, if there's a second Castle Creek Bridge, it doubles the number of evacuation routes heading down valley, and it triples the number of lanes available for evacuation. We'll have 2 bridges crossing Castle Creek under the preferred alternative, as we've discussed.
Diane, with the preferred alternative, although we'll have 2 bridges across Castle Creek, one of those, the existing bridge, will exit the valley via Cemetery Lane and McLean Flats, correct?
That's correct, and the light at Cemetery Lane goes away. So people would evacuate, which is actually quite helpful, because bringing them together at the roundabout would create some pretty bad congestion.
Could one of you address too, with the current Castle Creek Bridge, in order for it to become a non-highway bridge, what's required by CDOT in order to transfer that to local control? You don't have to get them all, but just generally for the council to understand the financial obligation that comes with maintaining that bridge and what condition we may or may not receive it in.
Is part of the record of decision. City Council at the time entered into a memorandum of understanding with CDOT. In that MOU, it describes that CDOT will bring that bridge up to a certain level before it's handed over to the city. So before it's devolved, meaning given back to the city, they'll bring it up to a minimum. So we're not going to get a decrepit bridge.
2 new bridges.
Well, we'll get definitely the new bridge, but the other bridge will be repaired and brought up to a minimum level so that it's safe for traffic.
How long would we expect that to last for before we would need to replace? Sorry, how long would we expect that repair work at handover to last for before either significant additional work to renovate it or bring it up, or a full replacement's needed that we'd have to pay for?
We won't know because it depends on the condition of the bridge at the time of which the new bridge opens, should the community choose the preferred alternative. So there's a combination of financial resources necessary as well as the community's willingness to not necessarily maintain that access route for a certain period of time for the rehabilitation work. Bridge rehabilitations can generally take 12 to 18 months as well. It's just as complex to rehabilitate major rehabilitation projects as it is to construct new ones. So the MOU does not speak to that level of detail of a guaranteed level of inspection. However, we believe CDOT's a good faith actor. And you will see things, though, like there could be restrictions on certain types of vehicles that could or should use that bridge as an example of some of the negotiations that would be required between the city and CDOT.
So what you see here is the preferred alternative. These are images for the initial and final phase of the preferred alternative. It's, as we talked about, it's highway and intersection improvements, transit system, and incremental transportation management program. The top graphic shows the initial phase, which would be 2 general purpose lanes, 1 in each direction, and then an inbound and an outbound lane exclusively for transit. The final phase eliminates the transit and puts in a rail route. And right now, the capital costs and operating costs make rail not really a viable option. However, it is possible that in the future, technology can change and rail could become more cost effective.
Can we go back to the previous slide for a second? This shows in the final phase that mass transit route on what is our left side would be inbound has gone away, and you have a single track for light rail. Would there be 2 light rails, one up inbound, one down valley, or?
This section from the roundabout to Main Street is 1 rail line.
So the record of decision is a document of yay thickness.
37 pages.
ROD is this big.
No?
The whole thing's sitting on my desk.
Well,
Okay.
with the appendices.
Right, everything that makes up the record of decision is several hundred pages.
We were just looking for a copy of it.
I think there's one in
Sitting on my desk right now.
There's one in my office as well.
We have the electronic version.
And then the preferred alternative, I'm wondering, is there, where is like a definition? Because we're using these and we're trying to use these terms as we talk to the public. You know, what you're showing here shows the capacity, I guess, of what the preferred alternative said and says. But then there's questions about alignment and those things. And I guess it was at the last iteration in the maybe 2007, was that when the conversation was reignited? And I'm kind of looking over at Rachel as well. Is that when the conversation was reignited about split shots and, okay, so it was like a straight shot, and then it was a modified direct shot, and then it was a split shot. And these things were all talked about to a pretty high level.
Split shot was looked at and evaluated in the record of decision, and it was screened out for a variety of reasons. Yes, people brought it back and kept talking about it, that maybe there was a new way to do a split shot, but it was looked at very thoroughly during the record of decision.
Because I think as we are going forward with this public campaign is to make sure that we're all on the same page, right? We're all using the same terms and what does it mean? And you know, even for me, and I've been around this wheel a few times, but I still, you know, what does the preferred alternative actually entail is still unclear to me. What the record of decision is as well, I don't think most people understand, was a whole package of initiatives that really work together for transit. So as we move forward, I really hope that we're doing our best to make sure people understand what little bucket each one of these things fits in and what it means, you know? What are our choices, if there's any choices, and that kind of thing. So when we talk about preferred alternative, I just want to get as much clarity continuing around what that actually means, because I'm not sure people understand exactly what it means.
Sure.
Ward just asked a question about this graphic, and this graphic ties into the graphics that we're using as well. And I've been having conversations with Sarah, and there's certain things that probably have to be included, and then there's probably things that don't have to be included. And you know, when we talk about things like the land bridge or the width and all these things, I think the public is going to really want to understand what does it mean? What's the preferred alternative mean? So
Yeah, and it's a good point, Mayor Tory. What our intent here is to do is to go through in probably a painful detail about what all the pieces are. So later on this presentation, we are going to talk about the transportation demand management elements of it. We're going to talk about the pieces of the preferred alternative that have been completed and which pieces aren't done. What we're not doing, though, is we're not really going back and rehashing the ones that weren't selected, because we really think we're probably at the point where we either need to say, we're doing the preferred alternative, we're not, and if we're not, the community can choose if it wants to restart a new record of decision. But that really the time for debating which version of it is, because we have a record of decision, we have that go-ahead in front of us, and that to move forward with that would require a vote of the people. So it's basically like the people do get to choose. Do we do it or not do it?
right, I just hope they know what the it is.
And that's what we're trying to do, absolutely.
Skip,
Ward was up first, but I do have
Skippy was.
Well, I was just gonna just to jump on that as well, because I started getting with the in the paper today a bunch of calls today, and people were referencing all of these different things. Oh, you're doing the straight shot now, and I'm like, well, I think the straight shot was a term for a specific version of an entrant that this isn't, but I wasn't around then, and I don't really know what the differences were and what parts of this that does have versus doesn't have. So I also feel like I'm already on sort of day one here struggling to even converse with people about this based on a past I don't understand.
So we have about 30 to 40 more slides, and I would encourage you to maybe write some questions down, and that, you know, we can circle back to the ones that become unanswered at the end of it. But I do think that would be helpful to you, and that would be consistent to generally how we handle it with the community, is because of that very issue. You asked us to educate the community on the preferred alternative, not on the 43 that were screened out. So we're going to say what we're showing you is what is the record of decision, and that what you're suggesting was probably one of the 43 that was screened out. In a lot of these cases, rather than discussing the other 43. There is not time in the 3 weeks you want us to produce this public engagement to provide that level of conversation right now.
Yeah, just briefly, I think page 30 of our packet, figure 8, or 3-8, is the alignment for the preferred alternative. And I think the record of decision supports that and gives us some latitude on how we use those lanes. But I think that's what's depicted in this visual. And I think that is what was defined. And if for a quick reference for people, look at that road alignment on page 30 of our packet.
And in fact, I think I forgot to mention this at the beginning, that the graphics in the video that we're showing, it actually has the alignment that is in the preferred alternative, and a land bridge is in the preferred alternative, and the bridge, like those locations are all correct. Everything else is conceptual. Well, the removal of Highway 82 between the roundabout and Cemetery Lane is also part of the preferred alternative. That definitely goes away. But like what it looks like and how it works, and do you separate uses, or do we have two land bridges? That's all to be determined by the community.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'm glad Sarah brought that up. As we go through, if you feel like you are really the test audience, we've only talked to a couple groups so far, and so if you feel like we didn't describe the preferred alternative well, please tell us that. And also, if you have any ideas about how we could present it differently that might be more helpful, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Importantly, the preferred alternative also includes incremental, what are called TDM, traffic demand management, a TDM plan. So the preferred alternative is transportation that not only includes infrastructure, it also has programs that reduce our reliance on single occupancy vehicles. And this part's kind of amazing that the community and this government has also moved forward on many of these transportation management programs, including paid parking, microtransit, dedicated bus lines, in-town buses, and carpool. And we were recently, Sarah, Trish, Pete, and I were recently meeting with Roland and the Federal Highway Administration, and they were actually astonished that this community had been able already to keep the traffic levels to 1994 levels, and those were specifically because of the transportation demand management measures. Now, let me just go back to, so the preferred alternative has these in it, as well as it's also in the final environmental impact statement. All of these are listed out. And what's interesting is that the way it's described in the preferred alternative is that as soon as you start going past those levels, then you implement one of them. Well, this community just went ahead and took all of them and went at a lot of them already. And FHWA and the Federal Highway Administration and CDOT actually have responsibility for kind of enforcing those if we don't enforce it ourselves. So we're already doing levels 1, 2, and 3. So I think, Mayor Tory, this is part of what you're talking about. These are the preferred alternatives that have already been completed. So in addition to all of those transportation demand management program elements, these pieces are part of the preferred alternative that are already done.
Which is part of the record of decision.
Which is part of the record of decision, yeah. And Tori, I'm with you. Like, it took me a while to figure out, like, this is part of this and it's not. And it was probably just a month ago that I figured out that the record of decision is the output of the environmental impact statement. These are the pieces that aren't completed.
Let's go back one slide real quickly, just for anybody that's viewing or going to see this later. This is completed, and I really love every time this gets shared, this type of information gets shared. It's really helpful. This is some really helpful information. So, because it kind of shows the overall master planning of this, and doesn't just take, the bridge as a project unto itself. It's part of a complete package. So this is great. These are the completed ones. And then we go to not completed.
And
And it also shows the community hasn't just been doing nothing, right? Mm-hmm. This has been going forward for quite some time.
And these don't all have to be done, right? So you can implement, as we've done, you can implement pieces of them and then look to add other pieces if traffic levels go beyond the 1994 levels. So, as I mentioned, this is conceptual, although the alignment and where the bridge is and the fact that 82's gone away between the roundabout and Cemetery Lane, those are all like real representations. The other pieces would be a lot of community input on that. So the new highway alignment.
It's page 30.
Thanks.
The new highway alignment uses 5.4 acres of the Merle Thomas open space, and it returns 2.5 acres through the land bridge and the new open space that's created by the decommissioned highway. The preferred alternative, as we've talked about before, it's a phased approach with those, you can see the two general purpose lanes that cars are on, and then the two bus lanes, and then the final phase would include a two-lane parkway and light rail. Again, if it becomes financially feasible in the future, and if the community wants it. There is a continuous wildlife corridor that doesn't exist now that would be created by the land bridge because it connects the Merle open space to the golf course. And we've already talked to the Open Space and Trails Board, and they would be involved in the project as well as the Parks and Open Space and Trails team. So again, 5.4 acres of Merle is utilized, and it returns 2.5 acres. And that right-of-way approval happened in 1996. And the voter approval actually included a requirement for an open space swap. So in 1996, the Aspen voters approved that right-of-way for a two-lane parkway and a corridor for light rail in exchange for other open space of equivalent quality and of equal or greater size. So this is actually a 39.6 acre piece of property, and this was acquired, we think, around 2000. Because the new highway alignment uses that 2.5 acres of space, it was swapped for this. This is the Mills property, and it's part of the Roaring Fork Gorge planning area. It's got amazing river corridor that's been preserved, and that does and the thought was that that does offset that open space. The 2.5 acres of returned open spaces within that blue box that you see, and it shows the land bridge, and then off to the right of that is where that Highway 82 would be removed. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about some of those opportunities for open space. Because it changes the road, we have an opportunity and probably even an obligation to improve how people and wildlife would move across that area. There are a lot of user groups in this area, as you know, right? Dog walkers, cyclists, wildlife, community garden, historic society, Nordic, runners, walkers, paragliders, heavily used piece of space. So the connected open space would be created, and you probably also know that we've had a number of accidents on the pedestrian and cycling trail that goes under Castle Creek Bridge, and so the new configuration would allow cyclists to avoid that trail. We'd probably still keep it, but they'd have the opportunity to change it. And as you can see on the slide, all of these are opportunities that we would involve both the city staff, Open Space and Trails Board, and the community in those discussions. And probably the council too, just for fun. So these numbers are in 2016 dollars. So as you know, construction costs have increased significantly. A new estimate would be performed during the planned development phase of the project, but we can't start going after funding until and unless the community would vote in favor of implementing the preferred alternative with buses instead of light rail across the Merle and Thomas right-of-way. And we'd expect, while the community and the city would contribute to the project, that the bulk of the cost would probably come from state and federal sources. So right now, we really do think, because of the age of the bridge, that there are kind of two choices here: continue to use the old one or build a new preferred alternative and keep the old one. The first option is the status quo. You can go ahead. Yep, you're good. The status quo, and this functionally hands over a lot of the responsibility for what happens in the future to CDOT. And, this is the opportunity the community has chosen and may choose to happen in the future. As we've discussed, as the bridge continues to decline, it will need repairs, and it may need weight restrictions, as Sarah mentioned. And that's what happened to the Maroon Creek Bridge. As many of you know, in the early 90s, they actually put weight restrictions on it, and I've heard Rachel describe that they would take grocery trucks and split them into multiple trucks so the weight of the truck could actually go across the bridge. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, how does a concrete truck get across the,
Hello.
or,
It doubled the prices on deliveries of things.
wow.
It doubled the prices on deliveries of things because they would have to break it up into 2 dump trucks of cement, not 1.
The ski company had to break up the cable that was restrung for the gondola into 2 different sections to go across the Castle Creek Bridge just a couple of years ago.
Wow. In order to do reconstruction of the bridge, there are times when Power Plant Road can be used. You can go under it, and they put netting under it. But there is certain parts of construction or reconstruction where there actually cannot be traffic underneath it. So that means we'd probably need to widen Power Plant Road and relocate it so it could be used as a detour when the new bridge is rebuilt over a new 2-year period. And we'd probably experience the same alternating one-way traffic, except instead of a few weeks, it'd probably be about 2 years. I want to start on this one and just to reiterate that if the community wants a new bridge, it would need a vote. The Aspen City Council first would need, as you know, need to vote to put it on the ballot, and then the community would then vote on it themselves. So even though there was that 1996 approval that conveyed the right-of-way to CDOT, because it restricted to that 2-lane highway and a light rail system, we would need to vote for buses. And the community, as I mentioned, would be able to determine how the highway would look and feel and how pedestrians would access it. And we've talked about that the old bridge would be repaired and then handed over to the city. We have a slide here for advantages and disadvantages, just at a really high level, right? You get the continuous bus lane from the airport, and it eliminates 2 turns in the S-curves, improves evacuation routes, and a third way out of town during the summer. It probably will decrease traffic and improve safety issues in the West End during rush hour. And wildlife wouldn't have to cross 82. And, of course, the biggest advantage from a transportation perspective is that it does improve transit times. I'm sure there are a lot more disadvantages, and you all have talked to people, and that there are more than this. But some of the big ones is, when I first started working on this project, I looked and was like, we have a real geography problem in this town, right? There is no real silver bullet for this project. And because it's a transit-based solution, it doesn't solve all the problems, doesn't solve traffic and congestion, but it does improve travel times for buses. And then also for Cemetery Lane, those folks, it'll be different to go in if you want to go to the down valley, right? You'll have to come in across the Castle Creek Bridge, you'll take a right on 7th, and then a right onto the new bridge to go down valley. So that is a disadvantage.
And question on number 3 on the disadvantages. It's my understanding that no additional properties would have to be purchased and demolished, that it would just be traffic in the vicinity of some residential properties, particularly at the end of Main Street?
I think there's one residential property, and I believe we're in discussions with those folks.
A quick question, since it's connected to this. I met with a citizens group earlier today, and the fact that if the preferred alternative goes forward, now the Cemetery Lane people will be coming into town, and to get onto Main Street, will a stoplight be required at 7th and Main?
Yes. Yes.
I guess there's fear that that additional stoplight's going to back up traffic even worse. That was just relayed to me earlier today.
Can you say more about the stoplight, where it is, how it functions?
At
It'll
7th,
be at the Hickory House.
At the Hick House?
yeah. So at 7th and Main, a new stoplight is part of the preferred alternative, record of decision would be required at that location.
Let's get more details let's finish the presentation. We'll come back to this.
Sorry.
No worries. I just want to, I think we have a lot of questions on detail stuff that, let's get through the big stuff and we can chew our bites later.
Cool. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a community choice, and if the community does want to pursue a preferred alternative, again, it needs a vote. We've got a number of public engagement events coming up. These are some of the big ones that we've got an online presentation this Thursday. This weekend, on Saturday, we've got a site tour and on-site, so we'll be meeting at Bugsy Barnard Park and taking people and walking them over so they can physically see where things are, go underneath the bridge, and those kind of things. In addition to this, there are about, I don't know, 40 to 50 small group meetings that we're doing, at least. CastleCreekBridge.com is the link you can use. It goes to the city's website, and there's a lot of information there, and we're still working on adding some FAQs there. And you can also email castlecreekbridge@gmail.com with questions, and you can, council, you can give this out to people as well, and staff will be responding to those as well. And what questions do you have for us today?
Council, we will make public notice that in case there's 3 or more of you at any one of those large public meetings, we'll just straight out make notice. So if you choose to come, it's already taken care of from a legal standpoint.
Okay.
Great.
We're done.
Good?
Yes, we're good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Diane, just a comment about the site visits. That going from Bugsy Barnard Park down under the bridge is really icy, so you might want to do some treatments there.
Thank you.
All right. So the last question that was asked was about more details about the 7th and Main intersection that would be traffic lighted and the like. Where or when are details like that either discussed or shown?
Sure, it only becomes relevant if the community chooses the preferred alternative, and if the basis of that decision is I would ask them to also consider the impacts of the current cemetery lane light, which serves a similar function. It's about the protected left-hand turn, and that would be a similar need at this intersection as the protected left-hand turns for
Coming down Main Street.
Right, primarily for private occupancy vehicles. Some of them will be shuttles too, for example, trying to get over to the Aspen Institute that would benefit from a protected left-hand turn with the signalization.
Yeah, I don't think, I think it's kind of understood that with this intersection, it would probably be, it would warrant a traffic light, if not even necessitate one by kind of highway regulation. But it's not shown in our collateral materials and such, and I think maybe it should be. If that is something that is part of this, then it should probably go to the public during our public outreach.
We'll add it to our presentation notes to make comment, to make people know.
That'd be great. And then, council members, if you have other specific questions about what you just seen or about the outreach that's coming up, please jump in at any time. I'll start asking a few others. Because that's where it intersects with town. But let's go the other direction. What is the plan for the roundabout? One of the statements is that it would be a continuous bus lane from town to the airport. what happens at the roundabout? How does it interface with the roundabout?
The current configuration of the roundabout is built according to the record of decision or the preferred alternative. So the roundabout as is, that is the preferred alternative.
Well, because currently, I mean, a bus lane doesn't technically run through the roundabout. It mixes traffic because that right-hand lane to get out of town, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is a lot of the traffic backup that we have, is there any opportunity for improvements to the roundabout?
Can I back up
Sure.
one bit about the roundabout? So the bus lane does start kind of after the roundabout, kind of in the roundabout. This will provide the opportunity for the bus lane to go through the roundabout. Now, how that looks, we still need to figure out on the upbound lane on how that bus lane will look, but outbound, definitely be a dedicated bus lane there.
That is a level of detail we'd look at in schematic design.
All right. Yeah, I think, again, as we go to the public, I think those are going to be some of the outstanding questions and some of the answers that they'd be looking for is about how's this going to work with the roundabout as it is. I would love for us to be able to make some improvements there in conjunction with this if this was to move forward. I think there are improvements. That seems like such a bottleneck for the potential that's there. And if we build to this alignment, I think there's great opportunity for improvement there. And then similar question that came up tonight again, how it interfaces the residential property impacts would be, I'd love to know more detail about that to be able to answer those questions. And I agree, really we're talking about the block that is at the end of Main Street. But what is that really going to look like? I think one of the questions that we have in front of us with this is what this corridor potentially would look like. I guess what I'm getting here is that the modified direct, which is the preferred alternative that is included in the record of decision, it has some flexibility. It could be as narrow as 4 lanes. It could be 2 lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of buses, with the opportunity perhaps to make the bus lanes into a light rail or trackless tram kind of thing. Or it could be more than that. It could also have another component.
True.
Right? So I think it'd be great to kind of, I think the public would love to see what that interface looks like in those scenarios or how we get there. And I guess partly I'm kind of leading my comments here a little bit. It's no secret that there are people that have opposed this for various reasons. And I think if this is the best path forward for our community, that minimizing those impacts can definitely be a positive for a lot of folks that have opposed this in the past. That's kind of where I'm going with it, is, if we really know what the impacts are and how we can address those and minimize those, I think we have the best dialogue going on. So anyway, I think a little bit more detail or information for the public about how it interfaces on the 2 ends of this proposal, I think would be great. For example, the land bridge, and I think this might fall also under the category of more work to be determined or schematics. The land bridges, I think, are fantastic, right? Putting back green roof on this parcel is fantastic. And I think the public would even be supportive of that as much as possible. I think I heard something about maybe there's 100-foot kind of, if a tunnel is more than 100 feet, it requires something greater for ventilation or this, that, and the other. Well, is there a possibility to break that up? Can you do, and we've seen them in other places, but land bridges that may have an opening and then another land bridge to even increase how much acreage is returned. So questions like that I think are what the public would really love to know, because those were some of the sticking points for some of the people that were talking about this in the past. And I think if we address those, it could be for everybody's best education on this.
Right, land bridge just means you put a roof over it and make it look like grass?
Yeah, the cut and cover tunnel, right?
Like this could extend in some direction.
It could be bigger, or more, maybe there's multiples. I know there's funding and
It's-
technical.
300 feet.
It's right in our packet. What is a land bridge versus a cut and cover tunnel? The difference is the length. The cut and cover tunnel is 400 feet long, would require certain fire life safety systems. The land bridge is less than 300 feet long, does not require any extra facilities.
Right. So it's 300 feet. So again, how we look at that, I think is some of the information that the public's looking for. The more questions we can answer up front, the better off we are.
And Mayor Tory, to that, and thank you for those, we do have an FAQ document that will be added to the website in the next couple days. And for example, one of the FAQs we wrote was, why can't this whole thing, why can't we just tunnel under it completely and skip the road? And so that question's answered. So as you come up with questions and as people have questions, please shoot those to me and we'll get those into our FAQs.
Great, thank you. And then the last one for me, and then I'll look around for other questions. Can you possibly go back to reference the funding/cost slides that you put up? Thanks. Can you just expound on these a little bit? I with bus lanes only. So that's 2 lanes of general traffic and 2 bus lanes. No skirt or corridor for another transit component. Is that what that means?
Yes, and the land bridge also.
Included in that.
Yeah.
And then it says operation and maintenance, 3.2 million annually. That's just for the roadway?
So this was taken out of the upper valley mobility study, where they looked at light rail and compared light rail costs to in operating light rail as compared to operating bus. So this is the operation and maintenance costs of running buses through the entire system from Brush Creek to Aspen as opposed to light rail.
Okay.
That slide's definitely going to need some definition of those things, some definition of what is included and what's not included, because I was just thinking of snow plow removal and is that the potential of what maintenance would be over 60 years, an average and things like that. So we need to include that would be the running of the buses.
Right.
And how much of that is now RAFTA covers the running of the buses cost?
Yeah, I agree with that. And to take that even a little bit further, partly because light rail, what's shown here for light rail, 5X of the bus lane for the construction, but only $3 million or more for operation of a light rail. There are a lot of people in this community still that were very excited about potential for valley-wide light rail and the like. So these numbers are like, man, the operation of it really not that daunting. The capital cost, extremely daunting. And just to kind of, anyway, I agree. A little bit more detail on these because I wasn't really clear what covered what and what we were trying to say with this slide. My initial reaction is that the capital cost with just the bus lanes is not as shocking. as the conversations in the past that have included light rail and, really the stumbling block that we ran into with that, in my recollection, some 20 years ago, was the cost. We ran up against a valley-wide rail implementation cost that took a lot of people's eye off the ball at that time, and we lost a mid-valley vote, I believe. But anyway, I just wanted to revisit this cost and funding slide because I had a couple of questions about it. And now I'll look around to other council members with any questions on what you see here or the outreach campaign going forward. I'll start with Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you to the whole crew who's not here today and you guys who are here presenting. I can tell an awful lot of work has gone into this. And, it's ironic, or it's interesting how it has occurred, because there's been so much work on the city's plate between the moratorium and code rewriting and all sorts of things, childcare facilities, housing being built. When we queued this up in the budget in 2021 for 2022, I just didn't anticipate the time it would take to do the background research, which is the most important part, whether the community is able to decide now or whether it's in a future time period. This is just, integral to those decisions being made. So I do think it's awkward that it's kind of backed up so close to when there is an election, if we're going to choose a ballot date or not, because of when you have to do it to get on the ballot. And, when I was first bringing this up it's just a critical infrastructure thing for the city in the future. But I was really thinking, how do we get in on some of that federal infrastructure money coming down the pike? Because Colorado's transportation funding has been notoriously lacking for a very long time. And so I really do greatly appreciate the effort in getting us to this point, even if the timing is a little awkward heading into Christmas and the busy season and things like that. I'd be first to acknowledge that. The one question I'd have to try to look at further from the packet that I had read was there was a question about growth in the valley and what were the projections. And I think the answer was, there really weren't those type of studies done, and it would take more research to do that, and I can acknowledge that. But then the very next set of pages in our packet are copied from the record of decision or the preferred alternative, talking about the parking spaces we'd need to build because of parking future demand. And they built that demand number on some sort of growth projection. So I'd love us to be able to find out what that was. How did they come up with 3,600 parking spots needed? And as that was a growth projection, they were projecting some amount of growth in the valley that would be fulfilling that. And I can't imagine that they really projected that we would have 3 Marriott hotels in the valley by now, and that it was that so much of a generation of jobs and growth have occurred. But I think that if we look at what is the unbuilt lots in the county and the unbuilt lots remaining in the valley, there's an awful lot of growth still coming down the pike towards us. And they're all being sold with, you're only a 40-minute drive from Aspen. So we need to plan on that going forward. The one thing I really think is very important here is for us to be able to talk about how can or cannot or will not the entrance and the Castle Creek Bridge completing the record of decision be integrated with the integrated mobility plan in the Aspen Institute area work. There seems to be this false dichotomy being set up that it's you either do massive transportation demand management and the integrated management plan, or you do a new Castle Creek Bridge, but you don't do both of them. And I'm like, wait a second, the bridge is infrastructure that's needed to support whatever type of integrated management plan we're able to actually fully ignite. But we need to be able to make sure to the public that that's what's clear. I mean, I've already gotten a couple emails that are like, try other methods, don't build a bridge. And they're just not connected. They're just not connected. And when we were at our last EOTC meeting, there were 2 really small funding requests that were in line with trying to control traffic growth and manage traffic. And one was HOV lane enforcement, and the other was the extra money to start studying dynamic pricing, which is congestion pricing. And there was a lot of hesitancy within EOTC, and a lot of like, well, I don't know why those pieces are important. There's really no traffic jam until you hit the bus lanes. And I'm like, wait a second, if you start peeling off all the components of transit demand management, you're going to have nothing left. And so to make the record of decision work and the preferred alternative work or the integrated mobility plan work, it takes the commitment of people to want to spend that EOTC money on HOV lane enforcement and being able to eventually put in a dynamic pricing or something like that. I personally look at this integrated management plan and think, well, where would you start doing the flash camera counters of cars to charge you on this current old alignment, and how much money would have to be spent to try to put up a counter and a charging system and everything else like that. The tools to control and manage traffic growth are embedded in the record of decision and in the preferred alternative. We could choose, and our community may well choose, to say, hey, let's just keep repairing the Castle Creek Bridge and see how long it lasts, and maybe we'll have to do something in 2025 or 2050 or 2030. But I think that is literally the road to an unrestricted 4-lane. I think that if we leave it undone long enough, CDOT is going to come in, or the community as a whole. And there's a lot of stakeholders in this highway beyond Aspen residents. The commuting public, the people over there in Twin Lakes and Lake County, the state highway, it's the state's highway. And we worked really hard to get a lot of acquiescence on community values and community priorities and community goals, which I think that 10 years from now, there's not going to be that necessarily deference to Aspen or its leaders if we have not yet chosen to solve it. And those are the things that concern me the most. To me, the choice is, are we choosing a system that we can use as a tool to manage traffic growth and control congestion, or are we choosing to kind of do nothing and hope it works out on its own with the tools we already have, and that does not lead us to the unrestricted 4-lane and parking garage under Wagner Park, which a lot of people still think is the greatest solution for our issues. So, so you'd kind of framed it as either we go forward or we don't, but there's a third option, and that's the unknown of the devil behind the door of, if we do nothing, what does our town really end up with in 10 or 15 years? And that's the great unknown. And I think that's what the burden falls on our council, is that we are the ones who are at the fork in the road, and we are the ones telling the public we have tools that can go forward and help control traffic growth and manage congestion, or we're just going to let it run and hope it works out for the best at some future point in time. But I leave that with one other real thought here for everybody, is I'd love to see us put together a list with Pete Stryker of what our current spending is on managing traffic and congestion. I look at our parking staff and transportation staff clearly managing these programs and receiving some revenues back in on parking, no doubt about it. But we're paying for the downtowner. We're paying for all the in-town bus routes and dial-a-ride. We pay for car share. We pay for raft share, bike share. And then our very large Regional Transportation Authority RAFTA contribution. And I don't know what that adds up to, but I bet it's $10, $15 million a year minimum that we're spending now to control traffic growth. And I don't know if we could double that to deal with the growth that's coming in the valley. I don't know, without a system and infrastructure that can support the mobility plans, we're not going to make any headway. So those are the things that mean the most to me. is I think our public needs to understand also how much we're already spending to control traffic growth. Because otherwise, you just keep hearing what if you just added one more bus? If you could just do this, you could just do that. And the dollars matter. The traffic jam we have leaving town is part of why, if you can service the intercept lot at Brush Creek twice an hour with one bus, that's great. But if it takes 2 buses to serve it twice in an hour because of the traffic jam and getting through the traffic in and out of town, the cost of operation, the cost of equipment doubles just to provide the same amount of service. And so those are my concerns, that this is the choice similar to building a water system or a water reservoir or anything, that if you know what you want 10 and 12, 15 years from now, you have to start doing it today to get there in time. It's just like saving for a house. You don't just suddenly say, I'm going to buy a house, I haven't saved anything yet. We need to acknowledge that this project is very far off. We're going to keep spending a lot of money on controlling traffic growth in the meanwhile, but without the tools that allow us to charge higher rates to come in during peak times, or to be free for a carpool, or things like that. You're not going to get dynamic pricing until you're able to do more of these things. So I just don't see how well we do the IMP without the infrastructure to run it on. Thank you.
John, do you have any questions or comments about this presentation? Anything you think needs to go forward to the public, or any other ideas, thoughts you want to add?
Oh, not much. I think this has been very straightforward. I know that there is information available to the general public, more than they could possibly hope for, if they really are interested in this subject. Me personally, my 2 main concerns are public safety and increased public transit. So I look forward to working more on this as we go forward.
Can I add 2 really short things?
Sure.
One, I just want to mention to your comment, Ward, about it is a single track coming out through the Meroldt, and it was thought that if there were a train system, there would be dual tracks at a different spot for passing each other. So you wouldn't need to dual track the whole length.
Exciting.
Yeah, you just go by each other. The second is on the tunnel. I know the cut and cover land bridge or tunnel, or should there be more or less, was always made into a point of opposition, and that describing it as, what a horrible entrance to Aspen, having to come through a dark, deep tunnel before you come into town. And so while having more land bridges and more land returned to open space might make sense from us on the surface, when the people who don't want to see anything go forward turn that into a nightmare scenario, like you're going through a haunted house to get into town because it's a 600-foot tunnel, which is what the ads did before. That was maybe why the tunnel was kept to the length it was kept to.
No, I've heard that concern several times already.
Then it's a really ugly way to enter a world-class community. Yeah.
Skippy.
Okay. I'm going to have to book some gondola time with John, who seems to have a much clearer picture of this than I do, to download. I feel less and less clear by the day, not more and more clear. I guess things that I'll want to know more about personally, the change in opinion about a public vote and the background of that. The project cost piece, is the $102 million, I know it's older dollars, but is that's the whole project? Because
In 2016
in 2016 dollars, so a lot more, but okay, but I mean, less than I thought, but just so I understand that. Tori alluded to this, but there's extra sort of non-programmed width on this. And so my questions are, what can and can't be done with that, other than use during an emergency or shoulder repair? What is that for? Is it necessary? Is it required? The traffic light is something that I want to understand more, the functioning of that and how it relates to traffic flow. You know, the roundabout, we talked about the slip lane on one side, but the other one, I don't understand. So those are like direct questions that I will want to understand better. To do what you asked us to do, Diane, and just sort of put yourself in the shoes of someone seeing this for the first time and what might be the responses. I mean, first response is like, I still don't really get what this is for. I know that there's 10 project objectives and I can read them, but they're these sort of broad statements. And I'd really want to know, what are we actually getting? You know, if safety is one of these, does this mean we could evacuate town twice as fast, 3 times as fast? Is that 2 hours versus 2 days? You know, I really want to understand what that means. You know, transportation capacity, we mentioned things that can seem conflicting here. A couple minutes, I think it says, for vehicles. I've heard less, but maybe more for mass transit. Sort of how does that break down? What does that mean for traffic? You know, if traffic on an average day, not an off-season, has backed up to the airport now, is it still going to be backed up to the airport? Will it be backed up to Buttermilk? Will it be further out? You know, all of those like sort of practical, like what are we actually getting out of this, I think is important, because, you know, as pretty as the renderings are, what's going to stand out to people is a giant highway coming into town, loss of open space, and just a much more urban, less characterful experience. And that's a reality that we have to weigh against the environmental and other threats to our community. But I think unless we really understand like what we're getting for all of this, it's going to be really challenging for people. It's certainly going to be really challenging for me. Other questions that would come up as a general observer would be like, didn't the Institute study this with the whole thing over a bunch of years recently, and what was the outcome of that, and how does that relate to this or doesn't relate to this? I totally understand that it is not our job or in our best interest to go out and pitch the 43 ideas. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I do think it's important when someone brings something up that we have literacy about what those things are to respond to them. If the response is, those have been dismissed, keep it over there, I think that's going to come across as really dismissive and build a lot of negative response for us. So I think we need to be prepared for that. I would like to be prepared for that so that, you know, one of the calls I got this morning was about the straight shot. I'd like to be able to say, well, actually the straight shot meant this. These are the things the community didn't value, and these are the things that are not going through, but these are the ones that are good. You know, that's just helpful for me, and I don't have the literacy the others have here because I wasn't here during that. So that's just, for me, is important. You know, other things that come across as like confusing or confounding are, we're doing this because we have to change the bridge because it's going to collapse, and yet if we do this, we keep the bridge. And so how does that make sense? And I know part of it is going to be different traffic pattern, different uses, but it's just confusing. And I think we'll get questions about that.
I just need to clarify, we never did say the bridge would collapse. That's a really important point, really important.
Well, eventually someday it would.
No, it will get closed most likely before it gets collapsed.
Well, we should try.
So, right, and so I just want to make sure, because I don't want to use fear tactics in our community for addressing this really big conversation.
Right.
Thank you.
So it will become unusable, but nonetheless, so it's going to become unusable, we have to do this, and yet we're going to keep it. So like, how does that make sense? I think will something come up. And then the other thing that just doesn't come up at all in this is character. I mean, our town cares so much about that. How will this affect the experience of entering Aspen? Yeah. How, for whom, for how long? You know, that's something that I think people will really want to focus on and will be really important to people in getting them to a yes or a no or to some version of it. So I think we really need to put a lot more thought into that. I think that is the totality of my confusion. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think those are good questions. Thank you. Ward?
Well, for me, this is pretty simple. I think that we have to replace the bridge. The bridge the Castle Creek Bridge is reaching the end of its useful life. In order for us to go forward, we need to clear a pathway I think that we have to start at a high level and work down to the details. I don't want the small, minute details to derail us at this point. I want to have, I can see getting community support from Picken County and the EOTC resolution, so the CDOT sees that we have support from surrounding communities. I think that immediately I take light rail off the table. Number one, for the expense. Number two, a modal change that would be required at Buttermilk to change from cars to a light rail. Light rail for the valley is cost prohibitive. It's over $100 million a mile. So I disqualified light rail from the beginning. I understand why there has to be a vote, because the vote that approved towards a light rail construction. So for me, doing nothing is not an option. Leaving the Castle Creek Bridge and repairing it all the time for me is not an option. I think that it's impossible for us to solve this half-century dilemma with 100% approval from the community. There are going to be people that are going to be disappointed. There are going to be people that feel that we haven't studied this enough. We have studied this enough, I believe. And I believe that we should approve the choice of moving forward with a preferred alternative using the record of decision. I think that moving towards 2 lanes of traffic and 2 lanes of HOV, unrestricted HOV, meaning that right now it can only be used for buses, that bona fide users of multi-passenger vehicles should be able to use that second lane in each direction. I was part of the 15-month study at the Aspen Institute. We have initiated a lot of those. The ride sharing, ride hailing, those are issues that can be help mitigate traffic, whether it's with an existing road or with a new entrance. I think that details like what can be used on the shoulder, and I respect your thoughts, Skippy, on the spirit of the entrance of Aspen, but I don't think that the people in 95 were not concerned in 94 and from then forward with the spirit of our town, and perhaps even more concerned with the spirit of our town than now. I think projections of valley growth I don't think directly translate to more traffic into town. Our town is pretty well built out. There's not a lot more that we can cram into this town, and the valley growth that we've seen in Mid-Valley at Willits, that's where the growth is going on. That's where the residential growth is going, that commercial growth is going on in the Willits area, in the part of the valley that's part of Eagle County, and further down valley as well. So I don't think we should use that as a reason not to do something about our entrance and to delay it, because I really do feel that Mid-Valley is where the increased traffic is going to be. BRT and RAFTA have done a great job. BRT runs like clockwork. It runs every 20 minutes in the morning, every half hour. It was initiated a number of years ago, and I think it's done a really good job of helping to mitigate and keep those traffic counts. I was always thinking it was the 1993 levels, but keeping them in those levels so that if we can decrease those in the future, that's a good thing. All of our internal, Rachel mentions the RAFTA circulators and the downtowner, those are all for transportation within our urban growth boundary. I think what this really addresses is our from the edge of the urban growth boundary into town, and I think I'll state it again. I think we've got to keep focused so that we can move forward with getting schematics designed done on this so that we can be at a position where federal money is available, that we're far enough down the line with our planning and our public approvals to get that federal money when it's available. And, you know, looking at $102 million 6 years ago, it's going to be substantially more than that now. And the idea of the light rail is just not, it's totally off the table for me because of the costs. Go through my notes here and see if I've forgotten anything. The new preferred alternative gives flexibility for additional transportation management, car share, ride share, dynamic pricing can all be incorporated into this. And I think that primarily the focus on the Aspen Institute forum was basically from the Park and Ride in, but it really, what this addresses is from Buttermilk in. And I don't think, when we looked at the concrete and the improvements of the roundabout, I don't think there was enough land to do much more with it. BRT comes right in and out of town in the right lane, and it merges pretty well. Probably much to the chagrin of the people sitting in their cars as the big buses pass them by. But it's been mentioned many times, there is no silver bullet. There is no single solution. But I think the choice too here with maintaining the Castle Creek Bridge for light traffic in the future, putting a new Castle Creek Bridge as a modified straight shot with a land bridge of 300 feet, so we don't have to have all the infrastructure for a tunnel. That minimizes, I think, the impact of, there are always going to be people say that, that this is bad, it's really bad. And, some aspects of it are. But there's no solving this problem without affecting some people and without some negative side effects. But those are, I think, what we have to accept. Us as a council to move forward with this where it hasn't been done for 50 years. And it's time. The bridge is nearing the end of its life, useful life for the traffic levels that it's being used at. And if we don't go forward now, if we delay it and put roadblocks in the way of progressing, we won't have a new bridge built by the time the old one has reached the end of its useful life. So for me, this is a pretty easy decision. I think that we need to clear the way to have schematic design diagrams built to get community support from EOTC, from the Board of County Commissioners, to demonstrate to CDOT that we're serious about doing this, because I am serious about this. I think we are serious about this, and we have to do it. So it's kind of like you get a decision point, and if you don't make the decision, it's the wrong choice. So there's no decision that can be made that's going to satisfy everybody. But I think that the preferred alternative, the recorded decision, is the right direction to go.
All right. Well, I was hoping for maybe more comments towards what you saw tonight and about the public outreach program that's coming up and stuff, and not so much about personal endorsement about the program and such. So I really hope that we are going out to our community with the information to educate. I did not support an advocacy campaign from this table at this time. So hopefully we're still on that path, because that's what we had supported at this table. I think that there are improvements that can be made. I think that we should still be looking at the best proposal that we can do here. And it sounds like we do have different opportunities in this. So I hope that this council stays engaged and doesn't just say, oh, well, I support it, so let it rip. We need to stay on top of this, and we need to do our best at public outreach in this. For me, I only have two comments on a personal level. One, I definitely want to see the IMS as part of what we're doing here. The record of decision was not just about a new bridge. It was more encompassing than that, and I want to make sure that we keep our eye on that ball. And then, like I said, I think that there is a way that we can do some design work on this that makes it as digestible as possible so that we, can bring as much of the community in on this decision-making as possible. I guess one thing that Ward does say that leads me to our next round, actually, I'll go to John and then I'll come back to what we need to talk about for our next decision-making and where we're going and what our timeline is. John, you had a couple other items?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot this. This was brought up to me again by several different people, and I think this would really help in the outreach and education campaign too. Our evacuation routes, I know, Diane, we talked about this a little earlier offline, but I have heard that the Merle Bridge is a possible exit route. I had heard earlier today, this was new to me, that the Rio Grande Trail could be an exit route. It was suggested recently that perhaps Power Plant Road could be used as a 2-lane exit out of town. Anyway, I have questions about all those things, and I'd like to know more about what our evacuation plan is.
Me too.
Thanks, John. Okay, so from here, do you have any follow-up directional questions that you were prepared for?
Only I think we can do this offline. If you do have any recommendations on how we make the preferred alternative more understandable, some of the notes I have here have already been helpful in indicating how we make that digestible. And also the other piece to think about, we are doing a number of venues where we've got 30 minutes, so we're doing 2 minutes of 2 minutes of video, 10 minutes of slides, and then Q&A. If you have any thoughts on how you present, because we do have a scaled-down version of this, and it's obviously a bigger challenge because we spent about 40 minutes on slides today. Thanks.
Thanks. Do we need anything else tonight? The conversation that seems to be surrounding this that we're not talking about is our timing, a potential for a March vote or a not March vote, and the ramifications therein. Should we be discussing that?
The council's certainly welcome to discuss that. There's a lot of information requests you made tonight that we absolutely cannot deliver, particularly with the holidays. Things that would be done in schematic design about roundabout configuration, 7th and Main Street intersection, land bridges, the frequency of them and the spacing of them, residential property impacts, and that's not just physical property impacts, but also recognizing environmental impacts to them. Those are not things that can be delivered to you in the next 4 weeks. Okay. I just want to be realistic to that. And if that's important information for you in consideration of a ballot question, then I would encourage you to not be pursuing March of 2023 for a ballot question. Again, those are things, evacuation study. I can tell you what our game plan is. A timing study is not one that I recall having been done recently in Pickens County. I know the last one I heard done was in Glenwood Springs for West Glenwood, and it was a long time without their second bridge. Do you remember, Jen? No? You have to come to a microphone to pick up if you're going to talk. Sorry. We haven't gone over how this room works yet. I'm not going to put her on the spot, but what I can tell you is that kind of information we're happy to work on. You've given us $2 million funding in the 2023, I anticipate you will tomorrow night when you do final budget vote. Those are all the kinds of things that funding would go towards and moving those pieces forward for you and the community to have more clarity before making a decision to place a ballot question or not.
Thank you for that. So, I was supportive of getting to a March ballot question because of timing more than anything. It's a muni election and it just worked out great. I didn't realize how disruptive it was going to be to everybody's work in City Hall. The amount of effort that is going into this is a lot. So, for me, unless the March vote was something that was necessitated by some of the funding questions that Ward brought up, or if there's an immediacy to that I'm not recognizing. I'd love to know that, but I'm comfortable and almost, I'm very happy to consider even a special election during season. I'm not afraid of that. I really was trying to match it up with March because I thought that was great timing, but it feels like that's actually maybe at a pace that could be moving ahead of our community. I would love to put a question on the ballot for our voters of something that I can support, knowing all the answers to some of the questions that we've been asking. Anyway, so I just want council members to think of that. That's where I sit. Is I'm afraid that working so hard for that March vote is more disruptive than needs to be, and that maybe even a special election in June or July when town is busy, when people are here, when our voters are here. Anyway, they're here in March as well, but I just don't know if we're on the right pace for this. Skippy, you have a comment there?
Yeah, this is about as consequential as votes get. This will truly forever change our community in significant ways. And I think we owe the public a clean election. When I say clean, I mean clear. And this conversation, the lead up, for me, while, I don't need to know where every bolt goes, the conversations I had today and then this, I'm not prepared to have these questions intelligibly yet, and I think I should. So I'm also comfortable. And I don't have a problem with a special election. I think this is the thing where we want a lot of turnout. We want people to really be engaged. And maybe something this consequential as a standalone is that, and maybe it's not. But I think having a lot of turnout is important for this as well.
Okay. Ward?
Yeah, I want to move forward with this, but March to me is way too fast. I think that we can't get ahead of the community. We need to have all of this outreach and community conversation. I'm not opposed at all to a special election. I don't know, maybe even July is too soon, but as we go through this, and when the availability of funding I was mentioning is not, it's not dependent upon a March vote. I don't want to get ahead of this. I think you all know that I think that we need to go forward with this, but we can't do this without giving the community time to re-engage and to be re-informed on, and then, a lot of the people that are living in town were never here during these discussions in 95 forward. So, the timing on the election, I believe there will need to be an election, but the timing, I don't want to push it. I think March is way too soon, and I think that we can decide on a timing for that election as we feel how the community is absorbing this. So special election would be fine with me. A special election costs maybe $15,000 in the scheme of $100 million.
$16.
Yeah.
I'm flexible on this. I think we should keep our foot on the gas, but if we feel or staff feels that we're not reaching the community to the best of our ability, then yeah, I'm all for a special election.
Okay.
I look at it a little differently. I see 90 days between now and March election, 3 months, December, January, February. And I guess what I really see is that this is going to be a defining issue for the election, whether it's on the ballot or not. I think it's going to be a question of all candidates of what are you going to do to eliminate the 2,000 cars a day that are going through the West End when traffic's bad? What are you going to do about the Castle Creek Bridge that is going to have a remaining useful life of maybe a dozen years? What are you going to do? I think that other than housing, this is going to be the defining question of this election and what candidates will want to do. And I think it's perhaps important to know whether candidates would rather say, let's go no now so that we can do a new record of decision and have that unrestricted 4-lane come in. Or candidates who say, let's go forward with the record of decision because they want to control traffic growth and congestion in the future. And I think that those are really the two alternatives and the two types of positions we're going to see from people who run for council. So, and I don't know that the third choice for if I was putting myself in a candidate position of saying, well, I think the Castle Creek Bridge will last long enough till I'm out of office, and then you guys can start getting the money somewhere else to build the new bridge, because it's not going to last forever. And this experience this summer did more to hurt our workforce than anything else. When I talk to people who took 2 hours to get home to Basalt at the end of the day, or school buses were an hour and a half late, or any of the disruption that people had with the bridge being patched up one more time, and to be able to tell people that's going to reoccur and reoccur and reoccur until the point in time in which we do replace the bridge. That's the bottom line of where we're going to be at. And we're either going to replace it with a bridge and a preferred alternative that matched our desires as a community 20 years ago to control congestion and traffic growth, or it's going to be a decision to do a new record of decision for something that allows for that sort of uninhibited traffic growth. And we can start saying that the new bridge will make it 10 minutes faster for a car driver or 5 minutes faster for a car driver, because, it's going to be 2 lanes in each direction. And that's what I think a lot of this community is waiting for. And so I think the longer we wait without actually addressing it, the more likely we are to end up with a worst-case scenario for our community's character and future.
Jeez, all right. Okay, we have another meeting. A ballot question has to be decided for a March 7th election in January.
You would need to decide, I believe the date is either January 6th or 7th.
And
Okay.
2 readings. Or is it
Correct,
2
you would
or-
have to have 2 special meetings before then.
Okay.
We would think you need 2 meetings. When you have those, we need to understand what's in the ballot question.
Sure.
And having some time to draft it, and then one to bring back for you to actually vote on whether it is what you want to do and staff
So-
accurately reflected your intentions.
So in the next 2 weeks, because we are planning on having our last council meeting on the 13th, in the next 2 weeks, we would need to decide on a lot. Then we would have to schedule special meetings for the beginning of January to decide on ballot language and the like. While I agree, Rachel, the election is 3 months away. December, a chunk of that is out of office time for a lot of people, if you like.
Your Honor, I'm convinced that March is too soon.
I agree.
Okay, we will resume that conversation at tomorrow's meeting then. This is a work session, so I would like to have that conversation in a regular meeting, and we can revisit this then.
Could I please ask, is there any additional information that's needed between today and tomorrow by any of the council members? Just
I already made that list.
Give me the short list.
No, I'm fine.
All right. Okay.
Hearing none, we are going to not prepare any additional information for you. If you do think of something, shoot an email over. We would be happy to be honest with you about whether we can answer that question in the time frame we have. and to help facilitate your decision-making and direction. I'd ask that tomorrow you just give clear direction to me so I can appropriately address staff and what my expectations of them need to be between now and a ballot question date if you are going that direction. Thank you.
I don't think we need more on the agenda for tomorrow night.
No, really, it's a good one. Do we by chance know, or can we find out what the first record of decision cost the state to put together? How much was it back in the 90s? And, it might give us some idea what a new record of decision would cost if that's where the community ends up going, looking for new and better answers.
We can ask for an estimate of what it costs to do a new record of decision today. That's probably a lot easier than digging up what was spent between 93 and 96, would be my instinct.
Yeah.
The reevaluation was $2 million, and that was a reevaluation done in 2007.
Right. Wow. And I'm pretty sure the first one was $3 or $4 million. So, I don't think CDOT's going to pay for another one for us if we want to do something different.
What do we need? Explain
Well,
more. I know what you're saying in general sense. but
I think
what-
there is going to come a point in time in which you have a record of decision, but you don't want to proceed with it. What do we want? We want a new record of decision that will be a split shot, or will use the old Castle Creek Bridge, or will be an unrestricted 4-lane, and, we'll need something new. There's going to be a point in time in which this gets too stale to use, it's just not going to hang out there forever. The fact that we've been able to do small pieces has kind of kept the record of decision alive as a viable document. But, if you say, well, we've built 80% of it, but the last 20%, which actually makes the system work, we decided not to do, there's going to be a point in time at which, there's going to have to be a new record of decision to do something different.
Okay, so you're saying if for some reason the community
Doesn't do anything.
didn't want to affirm the vote, right? That's all we're looking for these days is this bus lane only. Okay, so if we weren't to affirm it, a record of decision wouldn't be automatically triggered. It wouldn't be necessary.
No.
But if we wanted to look
To actually do something.
to do some other thing. Okay, thanks. That's all. All right. We will continue this at tomorrow's meeting under another topic. Thank you so much. Last comments, because I want to just focus on the public outreach and the presentation. I want to say thank you. Looking through all this, I think you've put forward as much unbiased information as possible. I think you're giving a clear picture to the community about what the opportunity here is. And you have done, we've never been, as a city organization, we've never been this, not aggressive, but in a good way, with our public outreach and our sincerity in our interest in this level of engagement. It's kudos to everybody that's working so hard, and also my apologies to everybody that's working so hard. Like I said, I really didn't know that it was quite a pace that we were embarking on as we were doing funding for this. I didn't realize that it was going to be such an interrupter in some of the things that we're doing. And I'm a strong believer in respecting people's end of the year holiday opportunities to recharge and be with the people they need to be with. So I in no way really support interrupting that, even for a year, because I think those events are extremely important, and every year is important. So anyway, I thank you so much to the council members as well for engaging in this. This is, as we were saying, a 50-year conversation. I'm glad we're having it, and I'm glad we're moving this dialogue forward. So until tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Thank you to GrassRoots. We are back tomorrow, 5 p.m. We have a public regular meeting, which means that public comment is taken at around 5 p.m. tomorrow evening.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, yes,
are
we
we doing?
do have a little more.
Thank you.
Sorry. Board reports, I forgot. All right, thank you to you guys. And Jack, nice shirt. Yeah, well done.
I'll go first.
Okay, the next part of our agenda tonight is board reports or council updates.
Great. I don't have any, and I have a COG meeting coming up this week.
Thank you, well done.
I have no reports.
Thank you, well done. John?
I've got a Nordic Council meeting to report. I didn't actually attend, but
Thanks, Amy.
I have Nordic Council minutes to report. I didn't attend in person, but anyway, here's the notes. Colorado, let's start at Ashcroft. They're discussing with John Wilcox the plowing of Castle Creek Road above Ashcroft. They don't want it plowed until after 15th, but Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Hunters want it plowed. Grange Ranch, they're talking to the Grange Ranch people about putting in a 2.5K loop on their pasture, which is down off of Rio Grande Trail. Snowmaking talks are proceeding. Spring Gulch, City of Aspen got a new piston bully snowcat and is donating its oldest one to Mount Sopris Nordic Council.
Sweet.
That's all.
Good job.
Rachel?
The most recent RAFTA meeting was canceled because it was going to just be a 3-person quorum, and they felt like they wanted to wait till they had more information, so that's been, no, excuse, APCHA. APCHA. And they will be having a slightly longer meeting on the 14th of December to make up for that. The Rudai Water and Power Authority has been working on a project that we saw a review of last week, and that is to try to integrate throughout the valley to have common watering guidelines or policies, and not wanting to call them restrictions, but watering guidelines. And so they've had a generous grant, which has been doing most of the work with some outside groups. We'll see the full presentation at some point. But some communities were like on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and others were every other day, and some were start at 10, and others are no watering after 9. And so they were just trying to get something that would be throughout the valley the same, and that it wouldn't be something that goes on and off with various levels of drought or not drought. And when people are like, well, do I live in Eagle proper, or do I live in Basalt, or where do I live? So they're kind of shopping that around all the different boards. They've taken a lot of comments about, hand watering is exempted and different new plantings are exempted and things like this getting established, but we'll be seeing that soon. So that's some of the exciting work that they've been doing. And then I will be going down to Denver on Wednesday evening for the Colorado Conversations group that we meet twice a year, and as Club 20 has integrated with them, that's where I'll be going. And then the second day is Friday, will be the CML policy meeting, and I'll be able to attend in person because I'm already there.
Nice.
And so that's kind of the upcoming schedule so far.
Thank you. I don't have any board reports that are for this evening. I did want to make a reminder, though. What?
No, thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor. I do have a board report.
Mine's not a board report, so please go right ahead.
My board report is Aspen Airport Advisory Committee. Just want to let you know that a few things have happened with that group here in recent weeks. First is the group is coming closer to agreeing on baseline emissions reporting for the airport. And so that is a huge step forward to be able to, that board to be close to be making a recommendation to the BOCC, continuing to work with the consultants to do that. In the proposed 2023 Pickens County budget is also funding for the airport to begin conceptual design on the new terminal building. And they are anticipating going forward with that conceptual design at the same time as they're working on the airport layout plan. that will need to be approved by the FAA, including how the new terminal design interfaces with runways and with parking, airplane parking for commercial aviation. So those are two key things from that. The third thing I wanted to let you know is that the advisory board has made a recommendation to the BOCC specifically around updating what's called the Notice to Airmen. Notice to Airmen is a notice to pilots that is put out to help inform pilots of nuances of landing and taking off in certain airports. And we are very fortunate to have a very talented group of technical folks who live in our community who are willing to share their expertise in providing some thoughts and recommendations back to the advisory board, in turn, hopefully for endorsement to be sent to the FAA in consideration of updating that. If you might have noticed, it's not been our commercial pilots that have been having issues at the Aspen Airport. It has been general aviation that we have seen an uptick in. And the Notice to Airmen is really, while it's for all, it will certainly help educate general aviation pilots about some of the nuances of landing, particularly in our airport, depending upon which way they choose to land. That would be hopefully beneficial to reducing the impacts to our commercial aviation from accidents from general aviation.
Very good.
That's all on the airport. And when you come back around, Mr. Mayor, I do have just one general announcement as well.
You can do your general announcement.
Great. I just wanted to make council aware that we have been installing the new electric cable throughout town for the last several, probably weeks now, days, weeks, I can't remember. But we're ready to energize that line tomorrow morning. And so we'll be cutting service from the old line to the new line between 6 and 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. We've reached out to all the customers impacted on that circuit, but I do want to make you aware in case someone message got mixed, maybe a spouse didn't talk to another spouse or roommates or business partners. If you get any of those phone calls, there will be brief outages during the cutover that will happen tomorrow morning. And folks can always call our utility department if they have questions. But this is a huge step forward into getting this line, this main transmission line replaced and energized. So really proud of the utilities team and the right-of-way team and the work they've done to pull this together.
What areas will be affected?
Red Brick to and through downtown is generally where this circuit operates. I think you approved the contract in maybe September that has a map in it. I'm sorry, I don't have a map with me right now.
I get these calls for all kinds of reasons, so I just want to know which ones are in the area,
A little
which
of
ones
everywhere,
aren't.
kind of.
Yeah.
Sarah, I think last week there was a brief power outage. Did you hear anything about that?
I believe there was a minor one, but it was pretty localized. I'd have to double check. I'm sorry, they sometimes run
No, it's all
together,
good.
whether
It
it
was
was
my
last
house,
week or the week before.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was impacted. It wasn't long, but it was a couple blocks. I was just wondering if it was, they fixed it quickly, so it couldn't have been too bad. But we have so many brownouts downtown and so many lines that are melting below the street. I mean,
Yeah, it's absolutely why these replacements need to happen, and they'll over time be transformer upgrades that need to happen as well, and that will be an interesting discussion. A lot of our upgrades in the core happen because the power demand that is being required by these new buildings, and we'll want to have a pretty in-depth conversation with the council how that relates to building IQ. And the ability of the infrastructure to support or not support your goals on the timeline that you want it to occur on.
Thanks, Sarah. The only thing I was going to bring up at this time was that this Thursday, December 1st, is the CML Effective Governance Workshop. So if anybody was interested in joining that, it's both virtual and in-person options. It does take registration, so, and there's a $50 fee for it. It's 9 to 4 is the full session, but if you wanted to pop in or pop out, you need to get in touch with Shannon. She will make your reservation, and then she will also, if 3 of us are going to be doing it, notifying it as a meeting. Yeah, so, anyway.
I'll be
I know, you're going to be already doing some meetings. So Thursday, December 1, 9 to 4, or what have you. I am going to attend the morning half of that.
Is it a thing that it'll be recorded and we could watch it afterwards? I was interested, but it didn't make my calendar, and I
Yeah,
know that
I think so, and I'll get
I'd like to watch
I'll
it.
confirm that.
Yeah, cool.
All right. All right, guys, thank you very much for your extra time this evening.
very good.
Now I can say once again, Grassroots, thank you very much. We're back at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Any citizen comments, petitions? See you then. Thank you.
Gracias.
Not less than 90 days.